Chosen one, something sacred just happened, and you don't even realize it yet. While the world raced for applause, you moved in silence. While others performed for attention, you gave from the depths of your soul. You didn't post about it. You didn't announce it. You simply loved. And heaven noticed. Have you ever felt like your kindness was invisible? Like no one really sees the way you pour out again and again? But oh, someone did. Someone powerful. Someone cloaked, not in fame or flash, but in humility and silence. A billionaire in disguise. No designer labels, no red carpet aura. Just a quiet spirit desperate to know that real goodness still exists. And you, without even knowing it, became their proof. You didn't do it for gain. You weren't angling for attention. You were simply showing up with the kind of heart this world can't manufacture. The kind that's been crushed and refined through fire. The kind that gives even when it's empty. Can you feel it now? That holy echo rumbling beneath the surface. And here's the twist. They've been searching for someone like you. Not polished, not perfect, but real, unshakably true, incorruptible. You were the answer to a prayer they didn't even know how to speak. When was the last time you felt the ripple of something divine moving through an ordinary moment? Comment 777 if your spirit is stirring, because something about this feels personal, doesn't it? And to every soul who's supported this channel, whether it's with a like, a comment, a share, or a super thanks, I don't take it lightly. Your presence here is a divine alignment. You didn't just stumble into this message, you were summoned. What if the biggest blessings don't come from striving, but from stillness, from purity, from the moments no one claps for, but God records in full? Because while the world was chasing clout, you were earning trust in realms money can't touch. That small act of kindness, the one you nearly forgot. It didn't just matter. It unlocked something, a door, a destiny, a vault. And now everything is shifting. So stay with me, chosen one. By the time we reach the end of this message, you'll understand. Your uncelebrated compassion just triggered a supernatural transaction. And what's about to flow into your life isn't just a blessing. It's a billionaire's blessing, wrapped in divine timing. Let's go deeper. God's chosen ones, your hidden act of kindness, just unlocked a billionaire's blessing. Number 1, your hidden kindness was a celestial test watched by power. It felt like nothing special at the time. Maybe you held the elevator for someone in a rush. Maybe you gave directions in the pouring rain. Maybe you paid for a stranger's coffee or offered a listening ear to someone who looked hollow. But what you didn't see, what your natural eyes couldn't detect, was the divine orchestration behind that very moment. It wasn't a random gesture. It wasn't just another small act. It was a sacred test, hidden in plain sight, designed not just to bless the one you helped, but to reveal something deeper about who you really are. Have you ever considered that the person you assisted wasn't just a stranger? That behind the simplicity of their appearance, behind the humble clothes and quiet demeanor, was someone with unimaginable resources. Not just wealth, but access, connections and influence wrapped in humility. And while you extended kindness without calculation, heaven was holding its breath. Because this was a test of purity, not performance. And you passed it not with ambition but with authenticity. There's a striking moment in the Bible when Abraham, sitting at the entrance of his tent, offers food and rest to 3 travelers. He doesn't know yet, but these are messengers from heaven, sent to announce the impossible, the birth of Isaac, Genesis 18. Abraham's hospitality wasn't staged. It was instinctive. and that's why it triggered generational blessing. How many times have you shown kindness without knowing you were entertaining divine presence? In a recent interview, Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, an Italian archbishop known for quiet diplomacy, shared, "When someone offers kindness without wanting control, they become a doorway for heaven to intervene." His words echo like a prophecy. Because, chosen one, you didn't help that person for status. You didn't try to network or impress. You gave because it was your nature, and that's what shook the atmosphere. Some years ago, there was a story circulating among executives in the non-profit world. A young woman named Leora, working late in a New York train station, offered her umbrella to a drenched old man. He barely spoke, just smiled and walked off. Months later, she was flown to Geneva. That same man, the founder of a billion-dollar humanitarian fund. He'd been watching for character, not credentials. And Leora, she now runs a global initiative empowering young women. No resume could have opened that door. Only kindness did. And it's not just stories like Leora's. Even creation itself whispers this pattern. Picture a glacier melting silently in the highlands, releasing fresh streams into dry valleys. The kindness you poured out, it's flowing even now into places you can't see, preparing the ground for your next elevation. You may not hear applause, but creation responds to every seed of grace you've sown. You're not the only one who's been underestimated. Remember Mephibosheth, crippled, forgotten, and living in obscurity, until King David asked, "Is there anyone left of Jonathan's house that I may show kindness to?" 2 Samuel 9. Mephibosheth didn't campaign for favor. It found him. And like him, your kindness has summoned a reward you didn't even request. And then there's the modern-day artist Makoto Fujimura, a painter whose slow, deliberate, faith-inspired style captivated collectors not with hype, but with healing. One of his patrons once said, "What moved me was not his work alone, but the peace that poured from his presence." He wasn't trying to sell anything. He was just being light. You, chosen one, carry that same presence. People feel it even when they don't know why. You thought you were giving a simple act, but in truth, you were reminding a weary soul that goodness isn't gone. You were showing a hidden giant that humility still exists. And in doing so, you unlocked a door only heaven could see. While others ran after influence with formulas, you inherited it through faithfulness. That's why this blessing is tailored. That's why it's coming fast and strong and silently signed with your name. Number 2, your kindness rescued a soul on the edge of giving up. You didn't just help someone rich, you touched someone who was quietly collapsing on the inside. Outwardly, they had it all. Wealth, prestige, the kind of access most people chase. But inwardly, they were unraveling. Their soul had grown tired, cynical, and numb. How many people do you pass every day who look whole, but are actually breaking silently? This person had stopped expecting sincerity, stopped hoping for depth, and had nearly closed the door on humanity altogether. Then, without fanfare, you arrived. Not with charm or an agenda, but with a simple, unfiltered act of kindness. No spotlight, no strings, just presence. Do you even realize what kind of light you carry when you're not trying to impress? That moment, to them, wasn't just helpful, it was holy. Because what they didn't need was another networking pitch, another empty compliment, another person worshipping their wealth. What they were secretly longing for was one real soul who didn't treat them like a transaction. And somehow, it was you. There's a story in John 4 where Jesus speaks to the Samaritan woman. He doesn't criticize her, he simply sees her. And in being seen, she remembers who she is. Could it be that your words, your tone, the way you held eye contact, made someone remember they're still human, still loved, still capable of feeling something true? And have you considered how much strength it takes to give kindness without knowing the pain you're interrupting? Your gesture became their pause, their sacred pause, the moment when a downward spiral met unexpected grace. Dr. Edith Eger, Holocaust survivor and trauma psychologist, once said, "The opposite of depression is not happiness, it's purpose." That's what you offered them, not relief, purpose. You reminded a weary soul that real people still exist. And when someone with power feels something real, they don't forget it. They act, they invest, they protect. I've heard whispers of Naya, a nurse assistant from Atlanta. On a stormy night, she stayed past her shift because he looked like he hadn't been truly spoken to in years. That patient, quiet and pale, turned out to be a majority shareholder in the hospital. A week later, she was flown out, granted full funding for her medical education. What if your next door opens, not because you asked, but because someone couldn't forget how you made them feel? In the shadows of São Paulo, Miguel da Cruz, a modest craftsman, sat with an injured child until help arrived. No one knew that child's father controlled the land under their feet. 2 months later, clean water, education, and clinics appeared across the neighborhood. And Miguel? He said nothing. Sometimes legacy begins with silence. There's something sacred about that kind of mercy. Some species of coral offer refuge to smaller, weaker fish, not to feed on them, but to guard them. No fanfare, no conquest, just quiet protection in a world built on survival. That was you. Without needing credit, without seeking praise, you became a shelter in the storm. And while the world measures worth in trophies and trends, heaven weighs it in mercy. What kind of atmosphere shifts when a single person chooses to protect rather than overpower? Maybe that's the legacy you're leaving behind, one sheltering act at a time. What if you weren't meant to save their life, but you saved their belief in goodness? What if you weren't meant to perform a miracle, but you became one? That's what happened. That's why this blessing isn't just a thank you, it's divine recognition. You didn't just offer help, you offered hope. And in heaven's economy, that kind of currency is never forgotten. Number 3, your one act of kindness triggered a divine timeline shift. That gesture you gave, the one you thought was minor, casual, just a moment of compassion, wasn't small at all. It didn't just brighten someone's day, it cracked the fabric of reality. It rerouted a soul. It echoed into a realm beyond time. Have you ever considered that a single act, done from the right frequency, can rewrite an entire outcome? You weren't just being nice. You were moving in alignment, the kind of sacred alignment that doesn't announce itself with fireworks, but shifts atmospheres in silence. What if your kindness interrupted a storm you never saw? What if your presence rerouted a decision that was about to cause destruction? In Esther 6, King Xerxes couldn't sleep one night. He asked to read the Book of Records, just so he'd be reminded of Mordecai's past act of loyalty. That one gesture, recorded years earlier, shifted the entire fate of the Jewish people. Could your kindness be quietly written in a record you haven't seen yet, only to be remembered at a divine hour? And while we often hear of karma as punishment or payback, we forget that in the spiritual realm, energy returns to its source, amplified. Galatians 6:9 reminds us, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." What if this is your due season? You weren't acting for reward. That's why the reward is coming. You moved in truth, in purity. And truth, when it is lived, not forced, starts fires heaven cannot ignore. How many others had the chance to step in that day, but held back? You didn't. You stepped forward, not to be seen, but because something in your spirit whispered, "Go." The world may teach strategy, but you moved with sincerity. That's why the universe is realigning itself around you. When your motive is clean, your movement becomes magnetic. That's not self-help, that's spiritual law. Let me tell you about Aidan, a delivery driver from Manchester. One morning, running late, he paused to help a man whose wheelchair had tipped over. No photos, no post. He didn't even get the man's name. 2 weeks later, that man's daughter, an executive at a tech firm, recognized him on the street and insisted he join their team's logistics department. Aidan now manages distribution for 3 countries, and he still says, "I just did what anyone should have done." But not everyone would have. You would. And that's why you're next. Nobel Peace Laureate Lema Gabowi, who helped end Liberia's civil war, once said, "It's not the grand speeches that shift nations, it's the small acts of peace multiplied daily." Your act was peace. It was defiance against the cold current. And that's why it has multiplied behind your back. This is a law written into the fabric of creation. In the Arctic, when a single glacier melts, its fresh water doesn't disappear. It seeps into the ocean's veins, shifting the salinity, redirecting migratory paths, altering currents, and even rewriting weather patterns continents away. One slow drip can redirect a storm. What if your gentle word, your unseen kindness, your whispered encouragement just shifted someone's emotional weather? What if your quiet presence broke the ice inside a soul frozen in despair? Not all storms are calmed by force. Some are melted by mercy. You didn't just offer kindness. You initiated a divine disturbance. That billionaire? They weren't just touched. They were awakened. They didn't experience help. They experienced hope. You made them feel something their money couldn't buy. Sacred interruption. And now that energy is circling back to you. Not because you forced an outcome, but because you became one. What if your transformation of someone else was the prophecy you unknowingly fulfilled? That ripple you sent out is now a wave returning, and this time, it's not just going to bless you, it's going to carry you into a timeline that looks nothing like the one you were on before. Number 4, you silently shattered the illusion that everything has a price. In a world where worth is often measured by market value and gestures come with hidden invoices, your kindness entered like a rupture. You didn't play the game. You didn't barter for influence or trade authenticity for attention. And that chosen one created a shift no money could orchestrate. Do you even realize how rare it is to walk into a room of the elite and leave an imprint without saying a word? They were watching. Maybe not visibly, but in the realm of power, observation is constant. The elite, so accustomed to flattery purchased, loyalty rented, and emotions borrowed, didn't expect someone to approach without a silent transaction beneath their breath. But you came bearing something they thought was extinct, unfiltered sincerity, no favor requested, no photos snapped, no tag me moment, just presence. Do you know how disruptive that is to someone used to being pursued, not seen? You reminded them of something ancient, something Edenic, that rare sense of interaction that doesn't demand but simply exists. What do you carry that makes even the powerful pause? You didn't rehearse your value, but they felt it. And in a room where everyone is trying to impress, the one who doesn't try becomes unforgettable. There's a sacred moment in 2 Kings 5 when the prophet Elisha heals Naaman, the commander of an enemy army, from leprosy. Naaman tries to offer gifts in return, but Elisha refuses. He wanted no payment, no deal, just obedience to God's will. That refusal stunned Naaman, because like the elite today, he was used to purchasing every outcome. Elisha's purity convicted him. It changed him. Could your refusal to play the game be what is softening hearts behind closed doors right now? Philanthropist and Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates once confessed in an interview, "In the circles I walk in, sincerity is one of the rarest currencies." He wasn't praising himself. He was grieving the loss of raw humanity in elite spaces. And that's what you brought back into the room. Have you heard of Jules, a part-time barista in Geneva? One morning, he spoke gently to a sharp-dressed woman who looked lost in thought. She had just exited a high-level boardroom, CEO of a global fashion house, and said no one had asked her how she felt in weeks. That moment, it shifted her. She later created a company-wide policy to promote emotional wellness. Jules never knew. He simply made space for honesty. What if your simplest interaction has already sparked policies, promotions, or philanthropic movements you'll never be credited for? But heaven has recorded them. Even in nature, power doesn't always arrive with noise. Consider the silent root systems of the sequoia trees, some of the tallest beings on Earth, intertwining beneath the soil to keep each other standing. No announcement, no credit, just strength shared invisibly. What if your unseen spirit is what's been holding up people who look unshakable from the outside? There's no luxury brand that can replicate soul depth. No private jet that can carry what your presence carries. And for people who've bought the world and still wake up empty, your integrity is not just admirable, it's magnetic. That's why they're watching, not out of suspicion, not out of pity, but out of reverence. Because when someone finally meets what they can't purchase, they know they've found something sacred. What you gave them wasn't a performance, it was a prophecy. And now they can't unsee it, not because you demanded to be remembered, but because your silence carried more weight than their scripted success. In a world where influence is often manufactured, your purity is disruptive power, and they know it. Number 5. You were felt before you spoke because your spirit moved first. Before you said a word, the air shifted. Your presence didn't just arrive, it permeated. You didn't command the room with volume or status. You carried something rarer, a vibration that whispered eternity. Have you ever noticed how some rooms grow still when you enter, even if no one turns their head? That's not charisma, that's spiritual weight. You walked in, and the atmosphere adjusted, not to your appearance, but to your alignment. The billionaire didn't pause because of what you wore. They paused because your energy wasn't transactional. It didn't reek of desperation or performance. It radiated wholeness. And in their world of shallow negotiations and rehearsed flattery, that was a cosmic disturbance. Can you imagine how rare it is for someone in their position, constantly filtered through manipulation, to feel truly safe in someone's unspoken presence? You didn't sell anything, you didn't flatter, you simply were. That level of stillness in spirit, unbothered by ego, untouched by clout, is almost extinct in elite spaces. But you carried it effortlessly, the kind of purity that doesn't shout, but speaks louder than sound. Like Jesus in Luke 8:46, when he said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." He wasn't touched by noise, but by intention. And you, chosen one, moved with the same spiritual current. They felt something leave you and enter them, and they couldn't explain it. Princess Diana, remembered for her grace beyond protocol, once said, "Everyone needs to be valued. Everyone has the potential to give something back." She understood what it meant to enter rooms, not with entitlement, but with empathy. And so do you. You didn't enter to be seen, but your energy revealed them to themselves. Have you heard of Isaiah, a silent janitor in a luxury hotel in Singapore? No one noticed him, until one morning he greeted a lonely guest with a smile and a quote about storms always passing. That guest? A media mogul grieving in silence. That one moment inspired a global campaign on mental health. Isaiah didn't have a platform. He was the platform. Just like you, his presence said what words couldn't. Even in nature, there are seismic forces that don't scream. Magnetic fields, invisible to the eye, still guide migration across continents. Whales, birds, even sea turtles feel it. What if your energy functions like that? What if your presence is a map for the disoriented, a compass for souls trained to fake their way through life? What if the reason you've always felt different is because you were never meant to blend in? You weren't designed to fill a role. You were designed to shift atmospheres. They may not remember your name, but they will feel the imprint of your frequency when they lay awake, wondering why the world felt different after you walked in. And that, chosen one, is why your reward is not attached to performance. It's magnetized to presence. You didn't strive, you flowed. And when someone flows in divine rhythm, even the most hardened hearts begin to soften. The billionaire didn't just notice you, they felt you. And that spiritual residue has now begun rearranging conversations, opening silent doors, and preparing unexpected favor in your name. Number 6, you made a powerful soul reconsider their sacred assignment. They were already gone, at least in spirit. The billionaire everyone envied, the visionary leader the world followed, had secretly decided it was over. They had the public's applause, but not their own heartbeat. To them, it was already written. The end. They were done. Done striving. Done hoping. Done giving. But what if your presence was the very moment heaven orchestrated to break that resignation in half? It didn't happen through a dramatic speech or a life-altering plan. It wasn't your resume that spoke. It wasn't your ideas. It was your soul. You showed up in their life like a flicker of fire in the cold. No pitch, no pressure, just presence. And in that stillness, something ancient stirred inside of them. Have you ever walked into someone's collapse without even knowing they were crumbling? That's what happened. They didn't need a strategy. They needed a reminder, not of success, but of sacredness. And that's what you carried. A purity of energy, the kind that whispers, "You are not done yet." When Elijah ran for his life in 1 Kings 19, he collapsed under a tree and begged God to let him die. The same Elijah who called down fire from heaven, now broken, he didn't need a prophecy in that moment. He needed a pause. So God didn't preach to him. He fed him, let him sleep, and fed him again. That divine gentleness restored Elijah's strength, not with rebuke, but with kindness. Could your presence have been that divine pause for someone who thought they had nothing left to give? Sometimes it doesn't take a miracle to save a life. Sometimes it takes a moment, one pure moment. The kind of moment you gave when you walked into that high-level soul's orbit and didn't treat them like a resource, but like a human. Howard Thurman, spiritual mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., once said, "There is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have." You became the sound of the genuine, not through words, but through being. And that sound cut through the fog of burnout, disillusionment, and disappointment. Across the ocean, in a quiet cafe in Lisbon, a man named Rami sat alone with a resignation letter in his bag and a mind full of reasons to walk away. He had built a tech empire but had lost the will to lead. A stranger at the table next to him looked up, smiled, and said, "Isn't it beautiful how even broken clocks still point to truth twice a day?" The stranger didn't know, but that line cracked something open in Rami's soul. He stayed. And 6 months later, he launched a foundation that now equips war survivors with tools for rebuilding their lives. What if one sentence from you already has a ripple effect far beyond what you'll ever see? The Bible gives us a full picture of how these moments matter, not just through Elijah's fatigue, but also through Peter's failure and return. After denying Jesus 3 times, Peter went back to fishing, done, ashamed, distant. But in John 21, Jesus appeared again, not with judgment, but with breakfast. He sat with Peter by the fire and asked, "Do you love me?" 3 times, once for each denial. That encounter didn't just heal Peter, it recommissioned him. Peter left that moment and changed the world. What if your kindness wasn't meant to comfort, but to recommission a weary soul into their original calling? Even creation speaks in symbols. Deep beneath the earth, when a tree is dying, it releases chemical signals, pleas for help. Through underground fungal networks, nearby trees send water, nutrients, strength. Science calls this the Wood Wide Web. Spiritually, this is what happened. That powerful soul was sending a silent SOS, and your soul answered. You didn't fix them. You didn't even know what was happening, but your presence stopped them from tearing up a contract heaven still intends to fulfill. What if the next global breakthrough was just rescued because you said hello with your heart instead of your agenda? They're not the same now. They've reopened the purpose they'd closed, revisited the dreams they'd buried, reawakened the fire they had mourned. And the most remarkable part, you did it without trying. You didn't perform. You just arrived. As you are. And heaven used it all. They were ready to disappear, but now, because of one sacred interruption, they've reappeared. And this time, they're not just returning to their role, they're returning to their reason. Number 7. You were the first to see a person, not a portfolio. Most people saw the net worth. You saw the soul. In a world where every smile hides a strategy, where kindness is measured in ROI and compassion is just a networking tool, you did the unthinkable. You showed up without an invoice. Have you ever considered how deeply rare that is for someone who's been treated like a wallet for most of their life? They've been scanned, sized up, and sold to more times than they can count. People come to them with polished greetings and hidden motives, always fishing for something, an introduction, a donation, a shortcut to prestige. But then you walked in. You didn't pause to assess what they could offer. You didn't scan for benefit. You didn't even flinch at their power. What made you look past what others chase? Whatever it was, it hit them harder than any pitch ever could. It wasn't just your words. It was your presence, a frequency too clean to be manipulated, a spirit too whole to be bought. And in that moment, something inside them softened, a corner of their soul that had grown crusted over from years of being commodified. Your silence was louder than flattery. Your stillness spoke more than charm. And without even knowing it, you became their mirror, not of what they owned, but of who they were before the money, before the brand, before the armor. There's a story in John 12 where Mary breaks open a costly jar of perfume and pours it over Jesus' feet. Judas, watching, scolds her for the waste, but Jesus defends her. Why? Because what she gave wasn't about value. It was about purity. It was love without angle, surrender without performance. Could your presence be the modern-day equivalent of that broken jar? An offering so sincere, it shattered someone's assumptions about the world. Even now they're trying to process it. They're used to being wanted but not valued, seen but not understood. And what you gave them in that brief encounter wasn't validation, it was permission to just be. How often do they get to feel human in a world that's constantly monetizing their existence? The answer is almost never, but you changed that. Malala Yousafzai, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, once said, "We realize the importance of our voices only when we are silenced." For someone like the billionaire, the opposite was true. They realized the importance of silence when someone like you didn't try to speak over their identity with assumptions. You made space. That space became their sanctuary. And somewhere in the quiet places of downtown Chicago, a girl named Tahlia had no idea her simple decision would be remembered for years. Working late at a bookstore, she noticed a sharply dressed man wandering alone in the philosophy section. No selfies, no recognition, just a brief offer. If you want peace, Seneca's Letters from a Stoic is a gentle place to begin. She didn't know it at the time, but that man was one of the most influential private donors to mental health startups in North America. Her sincerity stayed with him, and weeks later, her store received funding for a national reading initiative, not because she asked, but because her soul gave first. Nature reveals this principle in the way mountain springs emerge from nowhere, silent, cold, steady. They don't announce their origin, but their purity nourishes entire ecosystems downstream. That's how your energy moved. Not loud, not theatrical, just clean. And it washed over someone who hadn't felt safe in years. Have you ever wondered why you've always felt drawn to stillness, to sincerity, to not playing the game? It's because you were built for this, not to rise by association, but to realign others by simply standing in your truth. That's what they felt. And now, they can't forget you. They were probably waiting for the ask, the favor, the pitch, the hook, but it never came, and that absence spoke more than 1,000 intentions. What if your refusal to play the game is what finally brought peace into a life cluttered with performance? Now they're remembering, not just the moment, but the way they felt. They're not telling anyone, but they're replaying it. They're holding on to it, and it's making them rethink how they show up, how they give, how they lead. You may not know this, but you just became a reference point, a reminder that real still exists. You didn't just walk in, you awakened dignity. You didn't just leave an impression, you planted healing. And now they know the truth. You're not like the rest. You're not a taker, a climber, or a charmer. You are a quiet storm of soul-level integrity. You made them feel real again, and that feeling has no price tag. Number 8. The system mocked your kindness, but heaven honored it in silence. They called you too soft, too gentle for the battlefield, too forgiving for the corporate world, too generous for a system that rewards cold calculation and punishes purity. You heard the whispers, felt the dismissals, watched the doors close for people like you, while others schemed, lied, manipulated, and somehow kept rising. Have you ever wondered why it seemed like goodness always got sidelined? Why the ruthless were rewarded while those who chose compassion were mocked? You lived that tension, overlooked in favor of louder voices. Dismissed because your strategy wasn't ego, it was integrity. And yet, while they laughed and labeled, someone was watching. Not someone scrolling, not someone clapping from the sidelines, someone with authority, a gatekeeper, one who doesn't speak often, but when they do, entire rooms shift. They were observing you, not when the cameras were on, but when no one was looking. They saw how you chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier, how you stayed truthful when compromise would have been more profitable, how you stayed soft in a world that tried everything to harden you. Can you imagine the strength it takes to remain gentle in a system that rewards the opposite? That strength did not go unnoticed. It reminds me of the story of Daniel. Taken from his homeland, immersed in a foreign system built on pride, manipulation, and false gods. He was mocked for praying, threatened for staying true. But Daniel didn't fold. And when he was thrown into the lion's den, it wasn't just a test of survival. It was a test of whether integrity could outlast intimidation. And it did. Daniel 6. What if your lion's den wasn't dramatic but daily? The meetings where you stayed silent while others lied. The projects you poured into that others took credit for. The rooms you were left out of. Not because you weren't capable, but because your kindness made them uncomfortable. You weren't too soft. You were too pure for their agenda. One of the most respected modern journalists, Christiane Amanpour, once noted, "Truth told with dignity becomes a form of resistance. Your dignity has been your silent protest. While others played politics, you held to purpose. And now, your resistance is becoming recognition. In a small university town in Canada, a man named Devon quietly worked as a groundskeeper. Every morning he picked up litter others ignored, left notes of encouragement near the student cafe, and never asked for thanks. What he didn't know: one of the professors on sabbatical and battling depression noticed his actions every day. Those small kindnesses saved her from resignation. Years later, she won a national award and credited the man who showed kindness even when the world didn't. Devon was honored before faculty, not because he asked, but because he embodied what the system forgot: character. This quiet truth echoes through the natural world as well. Take the alpine gentian, a fragile-looking flower that dares to bloom on the coldest, harshest mountain ridges where few other plants survive. For years, scientists assumed it was weak, too delicate to matter, but further study revealed its roots run astonishingly deep, anchoring it through storms and frost. The beauty above was only possible because of the strength hidden beneath. So maybe your gentleness isn't a flaw. Maybe your quiet compassion, your soft resilience is rooted in something eternal, something unshakable. Could it be that what others saw as weakness is actually your sacred foundation? Have you ever considered that kindness isn't a weakness but a weapon against conformity, a protest against exploitation, a radiant anomaly that exposes the fraudulence of performance? That's what you carried. That's what disrupted them. And now, the tables are turning. The same people who mocked your softness will have no choice but to witness your elevation. The very door they tried to pry open with power is being opened for you, quietly, honorably, irreversibly. Not because you forced your way in, but because your consistency under pressure revealed something rare: incorruptibility. Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." You didn't give up. You didn't bow out. And now your harvest is coming, not in applause but in authority. What if you were never meant to fit into the system, but to expose its cracks by simply being who you are? That's what's happening now. The gatekeeper wasn't moved by charisma. They were moved by character. And they're calling your name, not because you were loud, but because you were real. So stand tall, chosen one. You were mocked in the outer courts, but you're about to be honored in the inner chamber. Your kindness wasn't weakness, it was the key. And now it's opening a door no one else could. Number 9. You passed the test you never knew you were taking. You didn't know it was a test. That was the whole point. The moment felt ordinary. Another person needing help. A brief interaction. A choice between kindness and convenience. Nothing about it felt monumental. But behind the plainness, behind the quiet, something sacred was happening. That person you held the door for, the one you gave time to, the one you didn't judge, wasn't just anyone. They were a gate disguised as a stranger. How often do we miss the magnitude of a moment because it doesn't come wrapped in gold? That's how tests from heaven work. They come dressed in the mundane, in inconvenience, in people who don't look like they matter. But someone was watching, not the crowd, not the followers. Someone with real power, real authority, someone who had the ability to change everything. And they weren't watching to be impressed. They were watching for truth. They were testing your default posture, the version of you that shows up when no one is clapping. They needed to know, are you trustworthy when the lights are off? Do you shift your spirit based on who's watching, or are you consistent even when no one seems to be keeping score? Your answer came without a speech. You offered dignity without conditions, respect without filters, kindness without calculation. You didn't know they were measuring your soul for access. You were just being who you always are. In Luke 24, after his resurrection, Jesus walks with two men on the road to Emmaus, but they don't recognize him. He listens, he teaches, he waits, and only when he breaks bread do their eyes open. They didn't know they were walking with divinity until the moment had almost passed. Could it be that you too entertained greatness disguised in simplicity? What if every act of grace, when no one's watching, is a seed sown into a garden you can't yet see? That's what happened. They weren't looking for someone to impress them. They were looking for someone who didn't need to know they were being evaluated in order to act with excellence. Angela Arendt's, former CEO of Burberry and Apple's retail chief, once said, "Everyone talks about building a relationship with your customer. I think you build one with your employees first." Her leadership legacy was marked not by how she performed under the spotlight, but how she valued the unseen. She often entered stores anonymously, observing how people treated her when they didn't know who she was. That's how she decided who to promote. Not based on show, but on spirit. In a bustling bus terminal in Buenos Aires, a young man named Tiago offered his umbrella to a disheveled stranger during a summer storm. No one noticed. No camera, no glory. That stranger, a silent partner in a global housing nonprofit. Months later, Tiago was offered a leadership role in a youth-led infrastructure project spanning 6 countries. When asked why, the man simply said, "He treats everyone like they matter." Could your unknown kindness already be echoing in rooms your name hasn't reached yet? Creation too holds this quiet wisdom. In the driest deserts where nothing appears to live, certain seeds lie hidden beneath the cracked earth, dormant, still, unnoticed. They don't rush, they don't panic, they wait. For years, sometimes decades, until a single rainfall touches the soil. And then, almost overnight, they erupt in wild bloom, color, life, beauty, where none was expected. What if your unseen kindness has been waiting for its rain? What if this very moment is the divine signal your soul has been prepared for all along? The breakthrough might not be coming. It might already be blooming. Have you ever stopped to wonder how many times you were tested by who you thought didn't matter? That's the divine irony. The test isn't how you treat kings, it's how you treat the invisible. And now, it's time. The silence is breaking. The observers have finished their notes. They've seen enough. The way you spoke gently to someone who looked lost. The time you didn't step over the janitor. The patience you showed when someone made a mistake. It wasn't weakness, it was evidence. Evidence that your character doesn't change with the setting. Evidence that your soul doesn't bend for gain. Proverbs 17:3 says, "The crucible is for silver, and the furnace is for gold, and the Lord tests hearts." And yours, chosen one, has been tested, not in spectacle, but in subtlety, and it has been found trustworthy. Now the doors you didn't even dare to knock on are opening, not because you begged, not because you performed, but because your consistency whispered, "This one is ready." You passed the test you didn't even know you were taking, and heaven and the hidden gatekeeper took note. Number 10. They tried to forget you, but destiny refused to let them. They tried to erase you, not out of hatred, but out of discomfort. You represented something they weren't ready to face, something that couldn't be bought, controlled, or replicated. Have you ever noticed how people often try to forget what convicts them? They pushed your memory into the margins, tried to box you in as a nice moment, a chapter they'd already closed. But destiny doesn't operate like that. When something real shows up, the story doesn't end. It echoes. They thought they could move on. They flooded their calendars, wrapped themselves in distractions, drowned in success. But your energy didn't leave with your presence. It lingered, not loudly, not with vengeance, but like a low hum in the soul, too constant to ignore. and it grew louder each time they passed the places where you once stood with quiet confidence and unmatched clarity. Why do some people haunt us, not with regret, but with truth? That's what you were, a mirror, one that didn't flatter but revealed. They saw in you something they couldn't fabricate: alignment, inner peace, spiritual authority without ego. While they were curating an image, you were living from your core. While they mastered charm, you embodied truth. You never had to prove anything. Your being was the proof. Your journey mirrors Joseph's in Genesis: betrayed, forgotten, left behind in a prison he didn't deserve. His brothers tried to forget him. Egypt tried to bury him. But when the time came, Pharaoh's dream needed Joseph's voice. And suddenly, the one who was dismissed became the only one who carried the solution. Could it be that you were never meant to be remembered for attention, but for activation? What if your absence became louder than your presence ever was? That's what happened. They tried to move forward, but the resonance of your spirit wouldn't allow it, because it wasn't just kindness you gave, it was clarity. It wasn't just attention, it was revelation. And that's what the soul can't forget. There's a quote from Maya Angelou, the poet and truth-teller of generations. "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And you, chosen one, made them feel something real in a world that constantly performs. At a corporate seminar in Cape Town, a woman named Zinzi offered a seat and a warm word to a man who looked invisible to everyone else. He wasn't part of the crowd, just a man in old shoes and silent eyes. She didn't know that he was the guest speaker's father, sitting in unannounced to observe the energy of the room. Zinzi's one gesture led to an invitation to join an international team of ethical brand consultants. When asked why, the speaker said, "She saw my father," which means she sees people. Even the natural world speaks this same message. In the Amazon, there's a species of seed pod that can lie dormant for decades until the exact atmospheric pressure, soil chemistry, and water level align. When the conditions are finally right, it bursts open. No announcement, no delay. That's how divine alignment works. It waits, then suddenly it releases. Could it be that this moment is your sudden season of recognition, birthed from the seed they tried to bury? They're returning now, not because you asked, not because you chased, but because the silence screamed louder than your presence ever did. And they're not just remembering you, they're seeing you for the first time, because now they're stripped of the illusions that once made your purity uncomfortable. Now they're ready, and the universe is ushering them back. Isaiah 55:11 says, "So is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it." You were a word from heaven sent into their life. And now that word is doing what it was always designed to do: pull them back to the truth. What if your greatest impact wasn't in the moment, but in what lingered afterward? What if the anointing on your life is the kind that doesn't need a stage to echo? You didn't chase. You didn't remind them who you were. You didn't send follow-ups or demand recognition. You simply stood, anchored, aligned, and heaven did the rest. And now, as their steps return to the places they tried to erase you from, they realize they never left you behind. They've been circling back to your frequency this entire time. And now the door is opening, not just because they see your value, but because your value never left the room. It stayed, it witnessed, it waited, and now it's time. Number 11, your compensation will offend those who played you. There are moments in life when heaven answers not with a whisper, but with a thunderclap. This is one of those moments. You've walked through seasons where your value was misread, your kindness misused, and your patience mistaken for passivity. You were labeled soft, naive, expendable, even foolish. They played you, but they didn't realize that you weren't being quiet because you were weak. You were being observed because you were worthy. Have you ever felt like the more true to your spirit you stayed, the more others mistook you for a stepping stone? They laughed while you gave, rolled their eyes while you showed mercy, mocked while you forgave. But none of that went unnoticed, not by the universe, and not by the one who had power to shift everything. The compensation that's coming won't just cover what was lost, it will make public what was always sacred. This isn't about revenge, this is about restoration and recognition. The ledger that heaven kept is now being released, and you're on the receiving end of a reward that will not just elevate you, but expose every lie spoken about you. In Esther 6, the king cannot sleep. He asks for the record books to be read, and there he is reminded that Mordecai once saved his life, but was never rewarded. Immediately the king declares, "What has been done for him?" "Nothing," they said. And so the king orders that Mordecai be honored publicly, in front of the very man who had plotted against him. Could your story be about to mirror Mordecai's? Where those who tried to bury you must watch you be crowned. This isn't just breakthrough, it's prophetic payback. The people who ghosted you, manipulated you, and counted you out, they're about to watch a door open for you that none of them have the key to. They thought they were erasing you, but instead, they were sharpening the blade that heaven is now about to place in your hand. What if the one you helped in silence was more than just a billionaire? What if they were a silent guardian of access, with influence that stretches across nations? They're not interested in the noise others make. They've been watching character in the quiet. And you passed the test without even knowing you were in one. Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential figures of our time, once said, "Real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not." And it's that kind of integrity that is now coming back with divine compound interest. In a quiet coastal town in Ireland, a man named Cillian ran a small bakery with little fame but much heart. One winter evening, he gave a warm loaf of bread to a stranger who looked lost. No questions asked, no receipt. That stranger turned out to be the daughter of a renowned developer seeking to invest in local businesses that mirrored authenticity. Months later, Cillian's bakery became the anchor of a town revival project. His kindness, once mocked by competitive neighbors, became the cornerstone of transformation. What if your unseen gesture is already echoing in boardrooms, back channels, and hearts that matter? You will see this sacred reversal mirrored in the living world. The eucalyptus tree, after enduring a wildfire, appears lifeless, its bark charred, its branches bare. But hidden beneath the blackened surface, something extraordinary begins. The intense heat unlocks secret buds embedded deep in its core. What seemed like destruction was actually activation. Within weeks, green shoots push through ash, defying all expectation. Maybe your fire wasn't meant to end you. Maybe it was the very force that woke up the dormant promise inside you. What if your greatest bloom begins right where everything looked burned beyond hope? And now, the shift is coming, not gradually, but forcefully. The door they tried to block with gossip, status, and slander is being kicked open by grace itself. The table they never invited you to is being expanded, and your name is being etched on a chair that cannot be pulled away. Isaiah 61:7 declares, "Instead of your shame, you shall receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance." This isn't poetry, this is policy. Heaven's justice enacted in due time. Have you ever imagined what it will feel like to rise without bitterness? To be lifted by truth, not vengeance? That's where you're going. The ones who tried to clip your wings will now watch you soar. And the irony is, they'll have no say in your flight path. You didn't save the billionaire for praise. You didn't give with a motive. But what you released in that moment, your essence, your integrity, your compassion was recorded, not in a social feed, but in a higher place. And now the blessing attached to it is chasing you down. They'll call it sudden. They'll say you got lucky. But the truth? This was earned in silence, carved in humility, crowned in purity. And no one, no scheme, no rumor, no resistance can stop what's about to unfold. So let them be offended. Let them be shocked. Let them whisper. You don't need their approval. You have heaven's decree. And now your legacy begins. Number 12. You're not just getting paid. You're being positioned for sacred power. This is not just about money. It never was. The moment you're stepping into now is not the result of some stroke of luck, a random blessing or a passing wave of generosity. It's divine architecture unfolding. Can you feel it? That subtle but unstoppable shift? That quiet confirmation deep in your spirit that says, this is bigger than you imagined? You're not just getting paid. You're getting placed, positioned, strategically aligned with something far beyond status, beyond applause, beyond temporary rewards. This is about power, but not the kind the world hands out for popularity. This is the kind of power that can't be bought, only trusted. And you, chosen one, have proven yourself trustworthy. Have you ever wondered why the path was so long? Why the reward seemed so delayed? Because what's coming required you to be forged, not just favored. Heaven had to make sure your character could carry the weight of the position you were being placed into. Influence, not just income. Authority, not just assets. Consider the story of Joseph, the dreamer thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, imprisoned by injustice. For years, his favor looked more like failure, but what people didn't know was that every valley was preparing him for a throne. Genesis 41:41 says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. That wasn't a promotion, that was positioning. And just like Joseph, you're being moved into a space where decisions are made, where destinies are shaped, and where your integrity will lead nations. This isn't a gift, it's a calling, a mantle, a realm of influence reserved for those who refuse to betray their heart to climb ladders. Did you notice how you never had to play dirty to get here? While others manipulated, flattered, schemed, you remained steady, honest, unshakable. That wasn't failure, that was formation. In a recent interview, Cardinal Peter Turkson, known globally for his advocacy on justice and ethics, said, the test of power is not whether you can dominate others, but whether you can lift them without losing yourself. And that's what you've done. You gave even when you were empty. You blessed even when no one thanked you. You remained kind even when it cost you opportunities. And now you're being entrusted with something that money cannot purchase. Spiritual authority that opens doors before your feet even touch the floor. A few months ago, a woman named Delaney, a school janitor in Georgia, found herself consoling a student having a breakdown. She didn't just hand the child tissues, she sat with him for an hour after her shift, praying softly, reminding him that he mattered. That moment, witnessed silently by a passing district official, set in motion a series of events that led to Delaney being offered a new position, head of student care across the entire county. It wasn't about a mop, it was about presence. And just like you, she was positioned not because she shouted, but because she showed up. What if everything you've endured was really about this placement? Not a random paycheck, but a seat at the table where legacies are written, a room that requires humility to enter and integrity to remain. And creation bears witness to this quiet truth. The mighty sequoia, towering and majestic, doesn't begin in glory. It starts from a seed so small it could be mistaken for nothing. For years, sometimes decades, It grows in silence beneath the soil, stretching its roots deep into the earth before ever reaching for the sky. By the time it breaks the surface, its foundation is already unmatched. So too with you. While others chased the spotlight, you were building depth. While applause was given elsewhere, your roots were anchoring. Now, the shift above ground is coming, not because you pushed for it, but because you're ready. Why now? Why you? Why this moment? Because your spirit carries a code the system couldn't corrupt. You didn't chase the crown, it found you. You didn't network your way to power. You nurtured your way to influence, and now the ones who whispered your name in backrooms are inviting you to sit with them in boardrooms. Not because you demanded it, but because heaven declared it. Your arrival isn't loud, but it will be undeniable. The compensation that's coming is simply the outward reflection of the inward stature you've already carried. And here's what matters most. It's not just a gift. It's a signal, a banner, a divine announcement that says, this one was tested and they did not burn others to survive the fire. So when the favor floods in, don't shrink, don't apologize, don't explain. You didn't manipulate your way here. You were positioned. You're not just being blessed, you're being activated. And in this sacred space, your voice will ripple beyond business, beyond influence, into culture, into legacy, into the hidden layers where only aligned souls can move. Number 13. The reward will be so specific, it will prove this was supernatural. This next moment in your life won't feel general. It won't look like something that could happen to just anyone. It will be precise, surgically tailored, prophetically personal. So much so that when it happens, you will pause and whisper, this had to be God. Because how else do you explain it? How else do you explain a reward that answers a question you never spoke aloud? That fills a void you forgot was even empty. That touches a part of your soul you thought had already settled for disappointment. Chosen one, have you ever carried a desire so deep you were afraid to say it aloud? Afraid that naming it would expose it to ridicule, or worse, to silence. And yet, even in your silence, heaven heard. The reward that is approaching was not manufactured by man. It was preserved, hidden, and protected until the version of you that could carry it arrived. Think about Hannah in 1 Samuel, barren for years, mocked for her lack, misunderstood even by the priest. Yet she prayed not just for a child, but for a child she would dedicate back to God. And when Samuel came, it wasn't just a birth, it was divine alignment. 1 Samuel 1:27 says, I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. That wasn't random, that was specific. Tailored, supernatural. What if the very thing you've been quietly aching for is about to knock on your door? Not because you chased it, but because it was always chasing you. There's a difference between generic favor and prophetic fulfillment, and what you're about to step into is fulfillment. Have you ever noticed how some doors remain closed no matter how hard you push, until one day they simply open without effort? That's not luck. That's divine timing. That's alignment with the frequency of your calling. Take Tyler Perry, for example, a writer, actor, and producer who once lived in his car. He didn't receive just any open door. He received the exact door that matched his voice, his vision, and his pain-transformed purpose. His plays didn't just entertain, they healed. That kind of breakthrough wasn't mass-produced. It was crafted. In the same way, your blessing won't be loud for the world. It'll be loud for your soul. It'll say your name. I once heard about Mireya, a retired nurse living in Bogota. After years of anonymous acts of compassion in her small neighborhood, she received a handwritten invitation to join a private advisory board for a global healthcare initiative. No application, no interview, just recognition. The founder, a man she had treated 23 years prior during a street riot when no one else dared to touch him. She didn't remember, but he never forgot. This is what happens when heaven aligns memory with movement. And just like that, have you asked why some blessings feel almost too accurate to be real? It's because they are. They are real beyond logic, supernatural in origin. You didn't earn it the way the world defines earning. You aligned. Even in nature, the monarch butterfly doesn't just migrate by chance. Its path is encoded across generations. They return to the same trees their ancestors once touched. How? No one can fully explain. It's embedded destiny. So is yours. So when this next opportunity arrives, will you recognize it for what it is? Will you realize it's not a coincidence but a confirmation? It will be the job that fits every quirk you thought made you too different. The relationship that sees past your trauma into your healing. The platform that doesn't tolerate your voice but was built for it. Have you been wondering why the wait was so long? Because quick answers rarely satisfy deep callings. What's coming had to be molded in silence, away from premature exposure. Now, the season has shifted, and heaven is pulling from its shelves a blueprint written in your name, not just to reward you, but to remind you, you were never unseen. Your integrity didn't go unnoticed. Your compassion didn't echo into emptiness. Chosen one, this is your tailor-made return. And when it arrives, don't downplay it. Don't question whether you deserve it. You do. Not because you performed for it, but because you aligned your life with the kind of kindness, purity, and unwavering truth that only the supernatural can truly honor. Get ready. This isn't a blessing, it's evidence. Number 14. You were always the wealthy one. Now the world will see it. You were never poor. You were never empty. You just weren't seen correctly. The world looked at your outer life, your bank statements, your job title, your possessions, and made assumptions. They thought you lacked, but they were measuring the wrong currency. How can you assess eternal value with temporary scales? The truth is, you were always the wealthy one. Your wealth was stored in places invisible to the eye, in the way you forgave without fanfare, loved without leverage, and stood in storms without screaming for help. But now the shift is coming, and it's not subtle. Have you ever wondered why people gravitated to you even when you had nothing to offer by worldly standards? It's because real wealth vibrates. It can't be hidden forever, and while the world applauded others for their noise, heaven was recording your quiet obedience. You gave when no one thanked you. You sacrificed when it cost you everything. You shared wisdom you could have sold, and even in your most vulnerable seasons, you remained generous in spirit. Who else does that, unless they're rich in a different kind of way? Look at the widow in Mark 12:41-44. Jesus sat near the temple treasury, watching the rich toss in large sums. But the one who caught heaven's attention, a poor widow who gave 2 small coins, all she had to live on. Others saw a tiny gift. Jesus saw extravagant wealth. The world saw lack. Heaven saw legacy. You're that widow, chosen one. You've been giving what the world couldn't understand, and now the reward is about to arrive in a form the world can't ignore. There's a woman the world knows today as a fashion legend. Coco Chanel began her journey in poverty, an orphan raised in a convent, dismissed by elites and doubted by critics. But what she carried couldn't be bought or silenced. Her eye, her instincts, her elegance. These were forms of wealth long before they became brands. She didn't conform to the system. She redefined it. Her inner richness was revealed slowly, then all at once. And in time, the world had to admit, what was once overlooked was actually priceless. So, what about you? Have you questioned why your success hasn't shown up in traditional ways? It's because you weren't being positioned for a regular life. You were being calibrated for a supernatural unveiling. I heard of Elias, a janitor in Madrid who used to quietly pay for children's lunches at the school where he worked. No one knew, until the school principal discovered that every time a child was behind on payment, Elias had already covered it. Years passed. One of those children, now a successful tech founder, returned, not just with thanks, but with a $2 million fund in Elias's name to help feed school children across Spain. Wealth found wealth, not in suits or status, but in heart and sacrifice. What if your Elias moment is coming? What if someone you've impacted, knowingly or not, is preparing to reveal the kind of reward that can't be bought, only given? You've walked through seasons where people mistook your humility for poverty. They thought, because you weren't flashy, you were fragile. Because you didn't dominate, you were disposable. But what they didn't see is that your strength came from eternal roots. Even nature understands this. Consider the mycelium beneath the forest. It's invisible, tangled underground, but it connects trees for miles, transferring nutrients and warnings. It's the real wealth of the forest. Unseen, but essential. That's you. The root network. The quiet power. Can you feel it now? The weight in the air? The tension before the curtain lifts? That's the world preparing to acknowledge what heaven already confirmed. Your spiritual bank account is about to translate into visible form, not just as money, but as influence, respect, and undeniable placement. In Luke 16:11, Jesus asked, "If you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? You, chosen one, have proven trustworthy. You didn't hoard, you healed. You didn't manipulate, you moved with mercy. You didn't worship wealth, you walked with wisdom." Now comes the divine exchange. The person you've quietly inspired, the gatekeeper you didn't know was watching, the divine ledger that's been building, it's all converging into this moment, not to flatter your ego, but to fulfill your calling. Have you noticed how the world is slowly waking up to the value of what used to be mocked? Empathy, softness, spirituality, integrity. These are the new currencies. And you, beloved, are already rich. What's coming isn't compensation, it's confirmation. So when the spotlight swings in your direction, don't shrink. Don't apologize for what took years of quiet faithfulness to build. Receive it. Stand in it. The world will say you became wealthy overnight, but you'll know the truth. You always were. Chosen one, breathe this in. What you thought was just a kind moment has now become a divine turning point. That unseen seed of compassion you sowed, that unnoticed gesture you gave when no one was watching. It was never small. It was sacred, and it was recorded. Heaven doesn't miss what earth ignores. That quiet act, offering your heart when no one asked for it, helping without agenda, holding someone up when you yourself were tired, that was a portal. A holy transaction wrapped in the cloth of normalcy. And because you didn't publicize it, because you didn't perform it, because you gave it from a place of truth, it shook the ground beneath power. While the world was watching influencers, God was watching you. While others were chasing platforms, you were holding doors. While they were rehearsing speeches, you were whispering life into the weary. And it was that posture, not your plans, that opened the heavens. Not your resume, not your image, but your integrity, the currency of the unseen. This isn't just a breakthrough, this is a prophetic unveiling. What was hidden in you is now being called forward, not because you demanded attention, but because you carried light into a place where even billionaires had gone numb. And now, the very tables that excluded you are being rearranged. The invitations are being rewritten. The gates they thought you'd never enter, you're about to walk through, not because you clawed your way in, but because God ordained your name to be whispered in rooms you didn't even know existed. You were never behind, You were being reserved. You were never forgotten. You were being refined. You were never unqualified. You were being purified for a position that required more than skill. It required spirit. And now the blessing comes. But not just any blessing. A tailored, thunderous, heaven-sent outpouring that doesn't just make sense. It makes a statement. The kind that silences mockers. The kind that restores generations. The kind that says, this is what happens when someone chooses to stay kind in a crooked world. So, as you stand on the threshold of this billionaire-sized blessing, don't just smile, testify. Let the earth hear what heaven already knows. You did not fake it. You did not fold. You did not scheme. You gave. You healed. You stood. You loved. And now, it's your time. To everyone reading this, if your heart burned while hearing this word, if you've ever given more than you had, if you've ever been overlooked for being kind in a room full of egos, this is your confirmation. The wait wasn't a waste. The reward wasn't denied. It was being built in silence. If this message resonated in your soul, I invite you to like this video, not for me, but as a public agreement with heaven. Subscribe if you haven't, because what's coming next is not just a message, it's a movement. Share this with someone who's been questioning if kindness still matters. And to every single person who has given through super thanks, whether it was $1 or more, you are a living part of the seed that makes this message grow. Thank you. Truly. But even if you've never given, never commented, never said a word, if you're still here, still listening, I honor your spirit. You are part of this. You are seen. I bless you now, not just with open doors, but with divine recognition, the kind that can't be reversed, the kind that echoes through legacy. Your hidden act has now become your public testimony, and your kindness has unlocked a wealth the world is not ready to explain.